Welcome back to another episode of our Eagle Perspective podcast. I am Mike Siciliano, Dean of Students of the Upper School, and today we're going to do something a little different. I'm excited about it. We're going to talk philosophy. I have two individuals with me today that I'd love to introduce. The first is our philosophy teacher, really the founder of our philosophy program, Jenny Cattaneo. Jenny, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, I know this subject is near and dear to your heart, as it is to our head of schools, the one and only Rod Gilbert.
Glad to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so there are not, I can speak from experience, and let's just come out with it. Jenny started our philosophy program and really has developed it for, 15 years now? Is that right?
Yes, about 15 years.
Okay, and it's been a labor of love. Rod joined us 3 years ago and is one of the more philosophical people I've ever met.
That's funny.
Is that fair to say, Jenny, in your experience?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I mean,
do you mean nerdy?
No,
nerdy?
I don't mean. I mean deep thinking. I mean capable of, anything I say is going to sound like kissing up now. So I guess I'll move on.
A raise for you and my son.
Yeah, there we go. That's what I was going for. There's a bookshelf over there with an incredible amount of philosophical works.
Yes.
So, and then I have to come to myself. So there was 1 year in which Jenny, in all her talents, was so busy she couldn't teach the course, and so I taught the course. And so I'm like the third wheel of this philosophical discussion. I'm honored to be in the room. So we're going to look today at a famous philosophical work from Plato called the Allegory of the Cave, and it has a lot of lessons for us as humans. It is something that we're going to talk a little bit about, Jenny, how you use it in your class, but also I think with all three of us of what we can learn from it as humans and how it sort of applies to Santa Fe. Is that a fair explanation?
Yeah, that's great. That's
Absolutely.
Great.
So at Jenny's suggestion, in true philosophy teacher form, rather than just describing it, you said, well, we ought to read for them the Allegory of the Cave.
Let's do it.
Okay, so
Let's do it.
So Jenny's going to read it, and Rod has a role.
That's right.
I think there's a lot of yeses in here, so I may sneak in some requests that I have just in the middle of the story.
That's perfect.
Right before you speak, Rod.
That's
if that's
perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect.
All right, so Jenny, why don't you get us started? Here is Plato's Allegory of the Cave.
I want you to go on to picture the enlightenment or ignorance of our human condition somewhat as follows. Imagine an underground chamber like a cave, with a long entrance open to the daylight and as wide as the cave. In this chamber are men who have been prisoners there since they were children, their legs and necks being so fastened that they can only look straight ahead of them and cannot turn their heads. Some way off, behind and higher up, a fire is burning, and between the fire and the prisoners and above them runs a road, in front of which a curtain wall has been built, like the screen at puppet shows between the operators and their audience, above which they show their puppets.
I see.
Imagine further that there are men carrying all sorts of gear along behind the curtain wall, projecting above it and including figures of men and animals made of wood and stone and all sorts of other materials, and that some of these men, as you would expect, are talking and some are not.
That's an odd picture, an odd sort of prisoner.
They are drawn from life. Tell me, do you think our prisoners could see anything of themselves or their fellows except the shadows thrown by the fire on the wall of the cave opposite of them?
How could they see anything else if they were prevented from moving their heads all their lives?
And would they see anything more of the objects carried along the road?
Well, of course not.
Then, if they were able to talk to each other, would they not assume that the shadows they saw were the real things?
Inevitably, they would.
And if the wall of their prison opposite them reflected sound, don't you think they would suppose, whenever one of the passerbys on the road spoke, that the voice belonged to the shadows passing before them?
They would be bound to think so.
And so, in every way, they would believe the shadows of the objects we mentioned were the whole truth.
Yes, inevitably.
Then, think what would naturally happen to one of them if they were released from their bonds and cured of their delusions. Suppose one of them were let loose and suddenly compelled to stand up and turn his head and look and walk towards the fire. All these actions would be painful. He would be too dazzled to see properly the objects of which he used to see as shadows. What do you think he would say if he was told that what he used to see was so much empty nonsense and that he was now nearer reality and seeing it more correctly because he was turned toward objects that were more real? And if on top of that he were compelled to say what each of the passing objects was when it was pointed out to him, Don't you think he would be at a loss and think that he used to see far truer than the objects now being pointed out to him?
Yes, far truer.
And if he were made to look directly at the light of fire, it would hurt his eyes, and he would turn back and retreat to the things he could see properly, which he would think really clearer than the things being shown to him.
Yes, yes.
And if he were forcibly dragged up the steep and rugged ascent and not let go until he'd been dragged out into the sunlight, the process would be a painful one, to which he would much object, and when he emerged into the light, his eyes would be so dazzled by the glare of it that he wouldn't be able to see a single one of the things he was now being told were real.
Certainly not at first.
Because, of course, he would need to grow accustomed to the light before he could see things in the upper world outside the cave. First, he would find it easier to look at shadows. Next, at the reflections of men and other objects in water. Later on, at the objects themselves. After that, he would find it easier to look at the heavenly bodies, the sky at night, or the light of the moon and stars rather than the sun and its light by day.
Of course.
And the last thing he would be able to do would be able to look directly at the sun itself and gaze at it without using reflections in water or any other medium, but that as it is in itself.
Yes, that must come last.
Well, we can end it here, and hopefully that gives you, as you are listening at home, a general idea of what this myth or allegory of the cave is. And it's the idea that we are chained up inside a cave, and in order to be enlightened, we have to be exposed to something, if not dragged forcibly out into the light.
Jenny, why don't we start with, for you as a philosophy teacher, when you first expose your students to this, what are some of the initial questions that you ask them or conversations that you have with them that stand out to you as being the most profound or moments, these aha moments for them?
Well, I think in the beginning, it's just getting them to reflect back on when was a time in class where you had that aha moment. Maybe it was in a math class when the concept was very obscure, and then all of a sudden you had enlightenment, if you will, and you could understand it. So things that had formerly been in shadows and you couldn't really decipher became clear to you. And so we start with the easy things like that, and then we move on into probably a deeper aspect of what does the allegory mean.
When you're in discussions about the dialogues, or this one in particular, about the cave, how are you cultivating a sense of wonder in the students? Because some students have the muscle of wonder and amazement, and others don't. How do you cultivate a sense of wonder?
I think one of the things I do is leave them in their uncomfortability at times.
Okay.
I don't jump right in and answer their questions.
That's
and
good.
I also let them circle around with kind of a safe person, if you will, where they can kind of test their ideas. Because I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to wake up their intellect and wake up even that sense of curiosity in them that sometimes can be crushed out if they're looking for what they think is the right answer. What does the teacher want? Well, I don't necessarily want anything but for them to wonder and question and think and explore.
Well, it's true sometimes that students and adults alike, we want to be able to ask a question and then just give me the answer. Just give me the answer, and then I, as a student, often just want to know, is this going to be on the test?
Exactly.
But what you're doing is cultivating, you're actually forcing the issue of they have to create new muscles to go try to find the answer. You're just making it harder on them.
Well, and that actually segues to, I think, part of the key of the story is the learning sometimes is uncomfortable to the point of pain,
That's a
right?
good point.
And not
That's a good
necessarily
point.
physical pain, but this process of, my goodness, I thought everything was one way, and I'm starting to see the shape of something that might be different, and
Yeah.
it's really uncomfortable.
So I have a different question. So I had an animated thing in my head about the cave, and not until I saw the movie The Matrix did I really understand the cataclysmic shift of the cave analogy. So you went high, everybody's nodding in the room.
Well, first of all, I don't know if Jenny knows I actually showed The Matrix to the philosophy class the year I taught it. I don't know if you approve or disapprove.
Well, I love The Matrix.
Oh, you
However,
showed in your
movies
class.
in class,
I did.
oy vey.
Did Mr. Hannon approve that?
Oh, I'm not saying I asked him for permission.
Good for you. So you showed it.
I did.
What? Okay, so why? And then what was the response?
Well,
of the
we were
students?
looking.
By the way, they just finished filming Matrix 4 in New York.
Oh, that's
the
that's
next
exciting
one.
to me.
Yeah, I just heard.
So we were in the midst of looking at a number of. Much of early philosophy is what is true, what is real, how
Right.
much, what can we actually know?
Right.
Are our senses, proof of knowledge? And I think the Matrix asks that question in a visually powerful way, right? I can, eat this food, taste it, see it, touch it, and yet it wasn't actually reality in the movie, right? And so,
They said this chair's not real.
Correct.
He said,
right?
And he said, "What's real?"
Yeah.
The whole band that blew at the top.
And
of my
you
head
have the
off.
one character who wants to go back in.
Yeah.
Because he just says, I don't care if it's not actually real. I want to make it my reality.
Right.
And so there's lots of good questions and
Yes.
conversations there. So
So did the students connect it well?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, had they already seen the movie, or was it new? The
It was
movie?
prob- it was-
It came out like '99.
yeah, most of them hadn't
Long
been
time
born
ago.
yet. Actually, all of them hadn't been born yet.
Yeah.
But I would say it was maybe like only a quarter had seen it.
Oh.
But they all liked it to the point where they were like acting out scenes from it the whole rest of the year. So, yeah. Anyway.
That's good. I'm glad to know that you showed the movie.
Yeah.
'Cause I was sitting here listening. I was thinking, I can't think of a better modern cinematography. Like, I can't think of a better feature film
Right.
that showed it. And
Yeah.
I've seen some cartoons of the cave analogy on YouTube, and they're accurate, but they're boring compared to what
Yeah.
the movie The Matrix
Yeah.
did.
The only other reference I can come up with it would be the marble in Men in Black.
Oh.
Is there a
Explain
marble
this
at
to
the
me.
end?
What now? What now? Say that again.
Oh, I think at the end of one of those movies,
Oh, at the end he opens the locker.
and there's
Yes,
something
and
with a
it's
marble
like,
at the
right, and it's like the whole Earth is really just inside this marble, inside this locker.
Yes.
There we go.
The Men in Black movies are great for all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff. Mentorship galore.
Right.
Too.
That there was
Yeah,
one
totally.
other
Yes,
movie.
It's one of my favorite
Yes.
mentorship movie series.
Are you thinking of Inception? The dream
No.
within the dream and the,
The dream
top
within the
spinning at the
dream.
end,
That
right?
was
I'm
good.
thinking of the one where it's that he lives in the domed. Oh goodness, this is Jim Carrey. He's inside.
Oh,
Jenny, you're gonna laugh.
Truman Show.
Yeah.
Truman Show.
Oh, yeah.
And guess
that's
what? I showed that at the end of the year.
Oh my gosh! Who gave you permission to do this?
All last summer when the pandemic was like super
Yeah.
crazy,
Yeah.
I just kept telling everybody, I feel like I'm in the Truman Show.
Right.
Like at some point a light's gonna fall out of the
Yes.
sky.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're going, "Hey Rod, we've been following you since you were a little
Yeah.
babe." Like at some point I thought I'm just gonna row the boat out there and get out of this
So
thing.
did you start driving your car around, just
I
veering
wanted to.
last
I
minute,
wanted
down
to.
crazy
I
streets?
was looking behind the
Yeah.
bushes, see if a Mike Boone would come down, That's how crazy the world has been.
Yeah, it's true.
Yes.
It's true.
Okay, so
you
you're the Truman Show.
I did. I mean, again,
That's
it's
brilliant.
it's another. At some point we got into like nature and nurture, and right,
That's
and
great.
yeah. So okay, so you were going somewhere with the Matrix.
Well, I was just curious what other movies are out. The only one I could really think of was The Matrix. I mean, I
Yeah.
couldn't think of another one that really
Yeah.
did it in a tasty
yeah,
fashion.
Truman Show is
Show's
also
up
up there as far as what is real and
Okay.
nature, nurture, and
If we don't have good Christian mentors with these kids as they begin to have their eyes open
Right,
to certain
right,
things,
right.
there are times when I think the world is just too much for them. And they do. They want to crawl back into the
Yeah.
Matrix. They want to stay in the Truman Show. They don't want to really know what's out there
Yeah.
because they feel like there's an either or to this thing.
Yeah.
And as we hold their hands as the older generation, and I'll definitely be part of that, but that we can walk with them into this dynamic tension of both and do it with the light of Christ. And
It's not an either or.
it's
Yeah.
not an either
Right.
or.
And the things of the last 12 months should not lead us to despair.
right.
They actually lead to hope.
I mean, we're in some sort of cave process right now.
That's right.
We
are
are.
in some sort of cave process.
We are. And those kind of titanic shifts are not easy to endure. The kids in the philosophy class are actually writing an essay on hope.
Oh,
and
really?
it's going to be submitted to a national conference put on by Plato, Philosophy Learning and Teaching Organization. And
Wow.
it's the preeminent pre-college philosophy organization in our country, and
There's not a competing organization
There is
called
not.
Aristotle that might challenge.
There is not.
Yeah.
Only
The
Plato.
School of Athens
Only Plato.
smack down between the two
Right.
philosophers.
So I'm eager to coach our kids into a place where one of them could write that competitive essay.
Good. I
Just
like
saying, there is a little competitive edge here.
That's
So
really good.
Maybe Rod, you can speak a little bit to what is our role as a school in that process,
Sure.
right? I mean, I think a lot of people have this view of education of, you teach them the facts, they learn stuff, they do well on the test, and they go out and then are successful because of what they've learned. But there's this other sort of process of curiosity and the unsettledness of learning that things might be different than you think. And
Right.
what's the role of the school?
Well, I think that some people think that when they come to a school, they're just going to be given the facts, and that reminds me of a quote from Charles Dickens' book, Hard Times. And in the opening 2 pages, a teacher is demanding that the children learn the facts. And Dickens was brilliant enough to name the teacher Mr. Choke'em-Child. And it's frightening. And so, as much as many people want to come first just to tell them exactly what to think, or here's the top 10 things, what we're more interested in is critical thinking skills. And if anything, opening up their minds to different ways of thinking about things. We're sending them off into a very complex world that's full of amazing wonders. And we don't want them just to have rudimentary understanding of things.
How do we determine when is the right time to show just a shape of something or reflection of something, and when is the right time to show the sun, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that we have a very unique situation at Santa Fe because we have a preschool, the little tiny ones, 3 years old, up to 18-year-olds. And we have the benefit of a singular school to gauge everything in an age-appropriate way. We know we don't have to teach them everything in 5th grade because we've got them at least 7 more years. Some of them 8 more years, depending on how they need a little more help. And but I think that we look for an age-appropriate way to open up new things to them, and we have the benefit of doing that as a single strain.
Jenny, what's something that kids in your class, or really young adults in your class, struggle with this allegory?
the challenge to it is kind of like you said, in the beginning of the allegory, you're just dragged a little bit closer to the light. And those first maybe aha moments, the kids will step out of their comfort zone and say, yeah, I didn't used to like a certain kind of music, but then I got introduced to jazz or classical, and I realized that there's actually merits to it. It's interesting. I can see why other people appreciate it. And so that first level of being exposed to the light is a very, very exciting level where you can step outside of your particular zone and step into the shoes of the other. Where I think it gets more exciting is once they take that second step, and they are, if you go with the allegory, they're dragged out. There are times when the kids are, against their will, being put in a space where they're going to question things. And I have found, especially in the current, just after confinement, after all of the stress and strain of this educational complexity that we find ourselves in, I'm finding that kids are either afraid to ask the question in a very safe environment, or they're indifferent. And so
Interesting.
some of the things that I push them to do, I guess the quotable Cattaneo, the future belongs to those who can ask a question that Google cannot answer. And so as they begin to ask those questions, I'm like, come on, you guys, you have to have questions. And in the beginning, they're even afraid to have a question. Is it the right question? Like, don't worry about whether it's the right question or not. Just go have a question.
Is it on the
test?
Right? Yeah.
No, it's not on the test.
Sometimes when I'll stop a class like that and say, okay, everybody get A's this semester.
Yes.
Now that we got that out of the way,
Yeah.
Yes.
let's go be human.
You are
Yeah.
guaranteed an A.
Yeah.
Now show me that you can earn it by thinking.
It frees them up.
It frees them up,
frees them.
definitely. So one of the things that is really a joy for me to do in the class, one of the cool things where I was forced out of my comfort zone, there was a year, once upon a time, at Santa Fe where I taught writing to publish. And definitely, I have a master's in English, but was not comfortable teaching that class. In fact, I cried when I was supposed to teach that class. And the backwards blessing of that class is I taught blogging to kids, never having blogged myself, and it has unleashed an incredible amount of creativity, not only amongst me as a teacher and other teachers, but with the kids. So the way that this goes is we kick things around in class. They've got the freedom to discuss, debate. What does it mean to be out in the light? What are things that you feel like you've been enlightened in? And then they go write about it, and they'll post it to a blog. And then they'll find images that illustrate what they've learned. And so I think for me to be able to come clear with them, these are the ways I've been pushed out of my comfort zone, and you kids are receiving the blessing of it. So the whole blog project is one of the most creative things I've ever seen kids do.
I think you just hit on something real important from a mentorship model. The mentor cannot take the student somewhere where the mentor has not been.
Yes.
For two reasons. One, you're a liar. And second, the kids know you're a poser. If
Yes.
you've not actually been through the journey yourself, they're not going to believe you. They're not going to go with you. So when I first learned of the cave analogy, I went to my spiritual conversion to Christ, and
Yes.
I have very vivid memories of that. So I equated this as a one-time event in life when I first read the cave analogy, and then the rest of my life I live as a Christian. And so as the older I get, I've really applied this to a lot more avenues.
And I think for parents who are listening to this, to hear my heart, the reason that you're sending your child to a Christian school, I am the poster child for the allegory of the cave. So if you teach this allegory from a secular point of view, you can be enlightened by anything.
Yeah.
Your guru, your yoga teacher, you can feel enlightened because you understand, the right kind of, clothes to buy, whatever you
Anything.
want. And you can stop the allegory right there. But I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with Rod that it is truly meant to be, even the reference of the sun at the end, that we are meant to see the sun, which is the good, which is God.
Yeah, that's exactly what Plato means.
That is what Plato means by the ultimate enlightenment, if you will, would be seeing God face to face.
The metaphysic.
The metaphysical.
That's right.
Yes.
That's what we share with Plato.
So the blessing of being here at a Christian school is that I don't just leave them with their vanilla interpretation of it,
Right.
but I do get to share my story. So in brief, my story is this. At the ripe age of 17, I was going down many a wrong path, definitely chained inside, seeing shadows of things, and desirous of truly understanding truth. And I went, if you will, on a shopping spree and thought I would find religion somewhere. So I'm one of those odd people around here that has not grown up in a Christian environment and truly came to faith out of the blackness of my own despair and out of atheism. So as I'm trying thing after thing...
How old were you when you came to Christ?
I was a precocious 17-year-old.
Okay.
I really, really wanted to know what would happen if I died.
Yeah.
There was a fear aspect.
Sure.
And is there love in the universe? And it really meant the world to me. It meant all of the difference in the world to me. So I tell the kids about being invited, if you will. The first amount of fire that I was exposed to was a Bible study that someone invited me to from a group called the Navigators. And very rigorous Bible study, and I'm totally raw atheist with all kinds of crazy ideas. And my Bible study leader patiently explained these things to me. And then ultimately in November of 1976, there was my true being dragged out of the cave. But the person who truly, I feel like, dragged me out was the Spirit of God himself. Dragged me into the light, and where I was faced with my own sinfulness, faced with the grace that was before me, faced for the sacrifice on the cross, and truly felt that I had gone from the black and white into Oz, and everything was on color. And I tell the kids that conversion experience, which is the joy of it, has never left me. If anything, it's stronger than ever.
Wow.
I also was that person who went back to my family and said, wait, you've got this all wrong. Don't you guys understand?
But you're a pain to live with.
Oh, I was a pain to live with. I was relentless in
Go somewhere, go to
sharing.
college.
Oh my goodness. No, they couldn't get rid of me. And I have hounded my family. And I do have the joy to say that both my parents, after 30 plus years of me praying for them, came to Christ.
Jeannie, while you were talking, I was thinking of Francis Thompson's famous poem, The Hound of Heaven. Because he describes his conversion to Christ as being chased by a hound in an unperturbed, unhurried pace. And so while you were talking about your conversion, in my head were stanzas from that poem. And then you just said, the Holy Spirit hounded you.
Hounded me.
Hounded you.
Pursued me. Pursues all of us relentlessly. And
It's frightening.
It is.
And then when it's complete and it's conversion, then it's you're light as a feather.
Amen.
There's a whole new world.
Amen. A whole new world.
Yeah.
So it truly is a joy to share that with the kids and have them kind of reflect on
Sure.
it. Many of them have grown up because of the wonderful parents we have here. They've grown up in a very secure, very Christian, Christ-filled, Bible-filled environment. And so for them, at times, there's almost a need to go back to the strangeness and the mystery of what this thing is called faith.
Exactly. I think teaching a mystery is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, I think even in that context, there are plenty of students that as they take your class and learn about this are in the midst of the cave or being dragged out of it,
Yes.
even from current understanding of faith to better understanding of faith.
Right.
I mean, that
Yes.
process is, the cave process is one that is ongoing and repeating, right? And
Right.
even for those who come to faith at a young age. And I think there's such a faith-building exercise in that, and almost and maybe, I don't want to say this too strong, but in a way it's what we want from our students, right? To embrace, you go through the cave once, it's really scary, it's uncertain.
Yeah.
Once you go through that journey a couple times and you see God's hand in it, you start to get almost excited about, like you said, the unknown and the mystery.
You're making me think back, though, to this whole idea of having a guide or a mentor in this journey.
Yeah.
So in the original story, our poor fellow is dragged up into the light. And we've talked about the significant people who have impacted us.
Yeah.
Say a Bible study leader or a mentor in your life. And I think, especially with a class like philosophy where people can get a little leery of like, well, what do you actually teach in there? And to know that it's because, again, you're at Santa Fe Christian, I'm not going to teach them that any light is the light.
Right.
That they have to learn how to be discerning to things that are truly just the flickering of flames on the walls and the muffled voices in the cave. And what does it truly mean to get out into the light? It's not the lights, it is the light.
That's right.
And so even Plato himself, there are incredible foreshadowing and hints to the person of Christ, even in Plato's Republic.
Yep.
So all truth that is God's truth is going to be light, but not all lights are the light we want them looking
Some
at.
are borrowed light.
Some are borrowed light.
They're
There we
borrowed
go.
reflections.
Yes,
That's like fool's gold.
exactly.
We've talked some about how this cave experience can happen over and over. How does that connect with what we want for our students in life as they go on and experience their own cave situations?
I do think the systemization of education could make it very rote, like we're just a factory. And we educators, I'm guilty of this, of just wanting predictability. Parents want predictability. They want the GPA set. We all understand the college industry sort of forces us into a system, and it's sometimes maniacally painful. And if we're not careful, we actually squelch curiosity. And if I had to choose between all A's for my own children when they graduated, or a real sense of curiosity of go learn the way the world works, I would have chosen curiosity. Because what they've become, what my children have become since 18 just into their mid-20s, is very, very different than what I would have predicted when they're 18. And I think there is a little bit, I've been able to see just in my own children that they're actually more curious about the way the world works they were less worried about the way the grade works. It's hard to detether it, but
Yeah, but we hear.
I don't want to squelch curiosity.
Right. I mean, we use that phrase lifelong learning
Yeah,
sometimes. And really kind of what you're saying is we want kids who see the littlest light to become aware, I'm in a cave, I got to go run to that light, right? Rather than
There's
having
more
to
to
be
know.
dragged through it.
Yeah,
right?
there's more to know.
Yeah,
And go explore.
yeah.
I have this nerdy fascination with economics and business and a driving passion to make the philosophy class infinitely applicable to their own lives. So, for instance, they read Nicomachean Ethics of Aristotle, parts of it, and then they have to write their own ethical code. And I make them do some serious mental push-ups to figure out how does their ethical stance apply and how is it tethered to maybe this Aristotelian, beautifully Judeo-Christian view of virtue as guiding our lives. So kind of everything that we're doing to expose them to the light of Christ, the light of knowledge, to light that in them, that there's so much more application to it. So like you said, curiosity. Give them freedom to question and wonder.
Yeah.
Give them a chance to kind of crockpot ideas so that they can creatively present them in a way that's winsome. And get them to collaborate in class. Get them to do things that I think they'll be doing in the future. They'll be collaborating. They'll be creating. They'll be thinking really, really hard and well. So
and working with a team to solve a problem.
Yes,
They need
absolutely.
to solve problems
Absolutely.
with a group, not just on their own.
Did you say winsome? Because you know that's one of Rod's favorite words.
It
is it really?
It is. Like all my little lights went off.
Yeah.
Oh, I do
Yeah.
like that word.
I
If
felt
I were
the
on
energy.
social media, I would have gone
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like.
Winsome.
But I'm not. So,
Yes, we do want to be winsome. We do.
Well,
Yes.
I know that this conversation could last really for much of the day if we wanted it
And
to.
it may. We're just gonna not
Yeah, we're
record
just
it
going to
all.
turn the mic off here in a sec. But thank you both for being here and
Sure.
sharing your wisdom and your insights, and I appreciate it. And we'll do this again.
All right.
Let's do it.
Glad
It's been
to
a
be
pleasure.
here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to those of you at home for listening to our Eagle Perspective podcast. We'll be back with more soon.